Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here this evening for the September 26th, 2022 Alpharetta City Council meeting and public hearing. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order and note for the record that all members of council are present and accounted for. As always, we begin with a Pledge of Allegiance, so if you're able, please stand and join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get started, just a little housekeeping with a couple of items. I'd like to announce that the playground equipment replacement, Webbridge Park Web Zone, was removed from the consent agenda by staff, and PH-21-06, Kairos Thompson Street Flats changed to condition of zoning, was also withdrawn by the applicant. They will not be heard this evening. We'll move on to the consent agenda, and the consent agenda consists of several items. First being council meeting minutes from the meeting of September 19th, 2022, the financial management report for the month ending July 31st, 2022, memorandum of understanding, GDOT Georgia 400 Managed Lanes Utility, Palo Alto Hardware Refresh, Managed Print Services RFP 22-124, Branchal Mcqueen Settlement Agreement, the Playground Equipment Replacement, Webbridge Park Web Zone, as was mentioned, that will not be heard this evening. And that will be all on the consent agenda. Is there anyone who would like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Councilman Hypes first.
Yes, Mayor, I ask that the minutes be removed from the consent agenda to be voted on separately.
Thanks, sir. Councilman Will.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to remove the managed print services from the consent agenda.
Managed print services. Was there anyone else? And Councilman Binder.
I'd like to remove item F from the consent agenda.
And I'm sorry.
Item F.
F, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Okay. So the consent agenda will be as listed previously by me. However, we will remove item A, council meeting minutes from the meeting of September 19th, 2022. We'll be removing the management print services RFP 22-124, and we'll be removing Branchal Mcqueen settlement agreement. All those in favor? Oh, we do need a motion. Thank you, sir.
Offer a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? Have a
and that, just to be clear, that's as amended, correct?
Pardon?
Just as amended, okay.
As amended.
As amended. So it was a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel and a second by Councilman Hypes. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the amended consent agenda, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. Councilman Mitchell. And it does pass unanimously. Do I have a motion to take up one of the items that was removed from the
Mr. Mayor, I'd offer a motion to approve the council meeting minutes from the meeting of 9/19 of 22.
Thank you, sir. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel to approve the council meeting minutes from the meeting of September 19, 2022. Motion by Merkel, second by Councilman Dorito, I believe that was. Any discussion? All those in favor, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. And that did pass 5-2 with 2 abstentions. There were Councilman Binder and Councilman Haynes were not present during that meeting, so therefore they had to abstain from the minutes. So do we have a motion to take up the managed print services RFP 22-124?
Make a motion to approve managed print services as read tonight.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel, a second by Councilman Dorito. Well, I'm assuming that we would have somebody come present the item.
That is correct, Mayor. If our IT department, Adam Montgomery and Tom Harris may come
I don't know why
forward.
it's removed.
Good evening. This is the an agenda item to award an RFP for management services to Edge Business Systems. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Will.
I thank you, I appreciate it. And I'm not against this issue. I just, for clarity purposes, for the public's sake, wanted to discuss in the agenda here, we had two vendors that we picked for this particular service, and we picked the vendor that was nearly double the cost of the other vendor.
Correct.
And I just wanted an explanation for the public's sake why we picked the much higher priced vendor for this.
As I understand it, the committee weighed all of the proposals, or both proposals. The other company was a company we use today, and the fact that we're going to RFP tells you that we probably were not overly thrilled with this current company, and we're looking for a new solution. The pricing, as I was told today, was suspect, that there wasn't, they were not able to pull what they thought out of their own system. And we have a number of issues today with print services with regards to supplies, their responsiveness. We've seen a steep decline in their service to our
Can you explain what that means? Their pricing was suspect? Whose pricing was suspect?
The vendor that we use today.
Okay.
My understanding is, again, I was on the committee, so I'm secondhand here, but my understanding of this is that the pricing quoted was based on a certain number of clicks, pages printed, that nature. We were able to pull data that pulled one thing different than what they were able to pull, and they pulled data that was less clicks than what we pulled, and they did their pricing based off of that.
And you did it historically, I assume?
Historical, yeah.
Okay.
Went back and looked at the data.
And so because of that, because their current vendor, they weren't doing a good job, we took an RFP out. We found another vendor. Their numbers looked more accurate, I assume?
Yes, and they have a much, they are managed service for many other cities and have a much stronger business model, I think.
And that's the reason we chose them. That was my
That's the reason.
question. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask a quick question of Mr.
Yes, you may.
Harris? So let me see if I can get Mr. Harris. So I guess just the question I have on this topic, because we only had two responses, did we do any negotiating with the one that we're asking the council to approve, since it's the higher of the two? Did we get a best and final, or were we able to leverage that negotiation at all?
Not in this case, because we believe, again, we've been paying north of $20,000 and not the quote that the current vendor gave in the RFP, which was 14, I think, 14,000. So more likely it is a $20,000 business, or at 20 plus. And that was part of the issue too, is you're not getting great service now, and then you get a price that's lower than last year. It begs the question, you're not going to get good value. And we don't do everything based on price. We do it, try to base it on value. And I think the committee's view was the technology as well. There was other issues that did rate this firm better as well. It wasn't just price, so all that together. But long answer for your question, but we did not negotiate down from the $26,000 is the cost of the maintenance a year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this item? Thank you, gentlemen. Do we have a motion from council?
Motion to approve the managed print services.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Mitchell, and that was to approve the managed print services RFP 22-124, second by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel. Any discussion? All those in favor, please vote yes, otherwise vote no. And it does pass unanimously. Is there a motion to take up the item F, Branchal and Mcqueen Settlement Agreement?
So moved.
Have a motion by Councilman Dorito,
Second.
second by Councilman Mitchell. Ms. Eswine, would you like to take this item, please?
Yes, sir. So this is a proposed settlement agreement for a full and final release of claims with Branchal and Mcqueen, who's the former solicitor for municipal court for the city of Alpharetta. As you all know, we had received a demand from Ms. Mcqueen several months ago following the shift from using an independent contractor, Ms. Mcqueen, to hiring someone in-house to be the solicitor. Ms. McQueen's demand was it was around $400,000 or so. This settlement is for a full release of claims with the city not admitting any of the allegations made by Ms. McQueen. It's purely for judicial economy, and I think the settlement amount is for $100,000. It does not include any terms that our office has any concerns with, and so we would recommend that you approve this.
Thank you, ma'am. Do we have any questions from council? Councilman Binder.
No question, but just a comment. Wait till later.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, ma'am. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
No, sir, we do not.
However, if anyone would like to come forward, now's your chance to do so. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Just a comment.
Councilman Binder?
Yes, sir. I pulled it from the consent agenda after time. And
Well, I was calling for a motion first
Oh.
before the discussion.
So I apologize.
That's quite all right. Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I'll move to approve the settlement agreement in full and final release of claims made by Branchal and Mcqueen.
Motion by Councilman Dorito. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Councilman Mitchell. Now discussion. Councilman Binder?
Thank you, Mayor. Now, I appreciate the work of council and our city attorney negotiating the best deal under the circumstances. I just with what we've seen on the public report, there's more questions than answers. I just cannot be supportive of awarding monetary compensation as a settlement. But that's just where I'm at. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Councilman Dorito, Councilman Mitchell, did you ask to speak after that? Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I have similar feelings as Councilman Binder, although I'm going to support this, and I'll tell you why. First and foremost, I want to thank our legal counsel that represented both the city of Alpharetta and the city of Milton in this deliberation. The initial potential cost to the taxpayers of Alpharetta with some insurance coverage, as already mentioned by Ms. Eswine, was going to be over $400,000. At least that's what was requested in the settlement agreement from the complainant, Ms. McQueen. We've gone through a number of discussions on this as City Council. Frankly, for the risk of litigation and potential increased liability to the city, where I believe, Ms. Eswine, correct me if I'm wrong, of the $100,000, $75,000 is going to be covered by insurance, $25,000 by the taxpayers of Alpharetta. I think this is a safe result for the city as far as looking at risk of further litigation and further risk of additional costs to the taxpayer. So am I happy about supporting this? Absolutely not. Ms. McQueen worked as our solicitor for quite many years. She is, did her job effectively, and it came as a surprise that she filed this suit against the city when she left her term of office. So with that said, I think the right thing to do is to support this so that we mitigate any additional liability to the city taxpayer.
Any other comments from council? James is looking perplexed. Is there something I should know?
No, sir. I was looking at the roll call for the coming vote. For some reason, Councilmember Binder was suddenly appearing as absent.
I perplexed James.
Okay. Just want to make sure before I called for a motion. Yeah. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to approve the Branchal and Mcqueen settlement agreement, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. And it does pass 6-1. Now we'll move on to the public hearing portion of tonight's meeting. First item on the public hearing is Z-22-13/V-22-25 Grand Communities, 2325 Old Milton Parkway. Mr. Woodman, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The first item before you this evening is rezoning and variances to allow for the construction of 24 for-sale townhomes on 6.15 acres in the downtown. The proposed density is 3.9 dwelling units per acre. The rezoning request is from R12 and O&I Office Institutional to Downtown Live Work, DTLW. There are also some variances related to building orientation, so allowing half the townhomes to be front-loaded, allow some encroachments into a non-perennial stream buffer and impervious setback, and to modify some streetscape standards. I do have the location map on the overhead. This property is located at 2325 Old Milton Parkway, 0 Norcross Street, and 210 Norcross Street, generally at the southeast corner of Old Milton Parkway and Haynes Bridge Road. This is an undeveloped property. It's heavily wooded. There's about 3.1 acres of floodplain and stream buffer on the property, so those are unbuildable areas. The surrounding uses are the Sapri Guben Jewelry Store is located to the west. Immediately to the west is a daycare center, My First Academy. To the south is the Haynes Park subdivision. To the east is the Chelsea Walk subdivision, as well as a plastic surgery office. The comprehensive land use plan designation of this property is mixed use live work, which does allow the applicant's proposed use. As I mentioned, there are some variances being requested. Downtown overlay site regulation variances related to the building orientation as well as streetscape standards. Also, general UDC regulations related to stream buffer encroachments. As you can see from the location map, this property does have a very unusual shape. It is situated between some commercial properties. There's pretty significant topography on the property. As you go from north to south, the property topography drops off as you approach the streams and floodplain. There is a stream buffer encroachment variance related to this. The applicant code does require that those variances are mitigated. So the applicant did propose to mitigate their stream buffer and impervious setback encroachments, which are just about 1/4 of an acre. So it's pretty small encroachment. And I actually think I've got, let's see if I have a plan that shows that encroachment. Here we go. So this is a plan that shows the encroachment, and you can see these kind of dark blue areas here represent where they're encroaching on the stream buffer. Again, it's just about 1/4 of an acre, about 11,000 square feet. But the applicant does propose to set aside an equivalent amount of stream buffer on the property outside of existing stream buffer or floodplain areas to offset that encroachment. Of course, we always look at, with a residential development, especially in the downtown, we're looking at other approvals of similar projects with respect to the density. So we did look at other projects in the downtown since the 2015 Downtown Master Plan update. The applicant's proposed density of 3.9 dwelling units per acre is lower than densities that have been approved in the downtown as well as along Old Milton Parkway. Go to the applicant's site plan. As you can see from the site plan, much of the property is left undeveloped. It's about 4 acres of the property, so a lot of this property down here is encumbered by stream buffers as well as floodplain. And then you have this property that connects to the property and has frontage along Haynes Bridge. That property also has an area of stream buffer that limits its development. This property also drops off significantly from Haynes Bridge Road, which impacts the ability to develop that property. Applicant has some information about how much that drops off. It would require quite a bit of fill to be brought in order to develop that. As I mentioned before, there's 24 for-sale townhomes. These are 3-story townhomes. Access is from a new driveway off of Old Milton Parkway. Half the townhomes are rear-loaded, so these 12 townhomes on the west side of the property are rear-loaded, which complies with the downtown. The townhomes on the east side of the property are front-loaded, which require the variance. The rear-loaded units are 20 feet wide. The front-loaded units are 24 feet wide. The townhomes along Old Milton Parkway are set back about 15 feet. The downtown live-work zoning district allows a setback of 10 feet. Other developments that have been approved along Old Milton Parkway have had a 20-foot landscape strip and 20-foot building setback, with the exception of the Chelsea Walk development that sits just approximately in this location here. That development was approved with a 15-foot setback in landscape strip, which is what the applicant is asking for. While not required by code, the applicant did provide on their site plan a 20-foot planted buffer adjacent to the office building that sits here. We also recommend some conditions for a double row of evergreen screening along this property as well. Each of the townhomes have the code-required 2 side-by-side parking spaces in a garage. They also have 2 parking spaces in the driveway. So the downtown code would require 60 parking spaces for this development. They are showing a total of 101. So each unit has 4 parking spaces, 2 in the garage, 2 in the driveway, and then there are 5 guest spaces that the applicant is showing down here, which is near a mail kiosk. On the site plan that went forward to the Planning Commission, there were only 2 parking spaces shown on the site plan. The applicant actually moved this turnaround right here. That turnaround used to be in this location. So they adjusted their site plan after Planning Commission, moved their turnaround for fire here. And then they were able to add in 3 additional guest parking spaces. Planning Commission did add a condition to one of the conditions that they recommended to City Council that they have at least 4 guest parking spaces. So they would now comply with that condition. This is the applicant's open space plan. The areas shown in green are amenity space. The areas shown in the purple or pink color represents civic space. It's about 1.35 acres, 22% open space. Minimum 20% is required on this property. They show a variety of pocket parks within the amenity space. There is a greenway trail that wraps in around in this area and has some seating areas down here between these 2 streams. There are 24 specimen or trees of quality called out in the applicant's arborist reports. Of those 24, they are only asking to remove 6. So there'll be 18 specimen or trees of quality that will be left on the property, as well as all the areas that are shown in stream buffer and floodplain. Those areas, every tree that will be in those areas have to remain as well. There's a stormwater pond and bioretention area down here on the south end of the property, which is the low spot of the property. Excuse me. And then the building elevations. So we reference the building elevations as Exhibit A in the conditions. This is the rear-loaded product. So this is the product that faces, this is the building that will face Old Milton Parkway. And this is the building that is front-loaded. This would be one of the buildings that would be, have its side turned to Old Milton Parkway. Let me just show you that on the. So this building with the front-facing garage would be representative of these units here. So we did have a condition where the side of this unit, Unit 24, faces Old Milton Parkway, that we wanted that to have the appearance of an entrance. The applicant did mock up a side elevation for that unit, and they do show an entry point on that side elevation here, so that would comply with the recommended condition. Of course, we look at the established review criteria for a rezoning and variance when we're assessing the applicant's request. We found that the zoning proposal is consistent with the downtown master plan. It's consistent with the future land use designation of the property. And the proposed density is well below densities approved in the downtown. With regard to the variances, we do believe that there are some exceptional conditions on this property due to its unusual shape, due to the topography and the presence of streams and floodplain on this property. We do have a condition, if approved, addressing the stream buffer mitigation. The applicant indicated that there were no comments received as a result of their outreach to the public. City staff did receive some correspondence from adjacent property owners with concerns over flooding, habitat destruction, stream buffer impacts, proximity of the detention pond to Chelsea Walk, as well as concerns with guest parking. And then we did show this request to the community at the Community Zoning Information Meeting on August 10th of 2022. Similar concerns over sufficient guest parking, stream buffer encroachments, and proximity of the detention pond to Chelsea Walk. With that, Planning Commission considered this request at their September 1st Planning Commission meeting. Staff recommended approval subject to 18 conditions. There was one public comment in support of the proposal at that meeting. And Planning Commission recommended unanimous approval, subject to the staff's recommended conditions. They did make some minor modification to 2 conditions, including adding the condition addressing the guest parking. And with that, Planning Commission recommendation is to approve subject to 19 conditions, and I'll go through those. Condition 1 is a site plan specific condition. Planning Commission did delete the sentence at the end of that condition, and they added in a sentence that says the remaining 4 acres of the site shall remain in an undisturbed state. Just for reference, the remaining 4 acres refers to all the floodplain and stream buffer here, as well as the remainder of this property that abuts Haynes Bridge Road. Condition 2 addresses the architecture and materials and references, requires it what's built to be substantially similar to the submitted renderings. Those are labeled Exhibit A, what I just showed to you. There's also conditions requiring Design Review Board approval. Townhome shall have 4-sided architecture, materials, and details. And townhome side elevation facing Old Milton Parkway shall have a porch or other significant projection to give the appearance of a front elevation as approved by DRB. That is that side elevation that I showed to you. Condition 3 addresses the density. Condition 4 allows courtyards to encroach into a landscape strip provided the required material is planted. Condition 5 addresses the Old Milton Parkway streetscape. Condition 6 addresses the internal streetscape, so how the internal street, alley, and sidewalks are developed, and it ties it back to the applicant's site plan. Condition 7 deals with the minimum 10-foot landscape strips required along internal streets. We do have an exception in that second sentence if Fulton County requires an unencumbered easement for their water lines. Condition 8 addresses the 20-foot landscape strip / building setback along Old Milton Parkway. Condition 9 addresses the 20-foot planted buffer on the east side of the property, as well as a condition requiring a double row of shrubs on the west side of the property adjacent to My First Academy. Condition 10, project entrance shall have a decorative paver apron, landscaping, decorative low wall, and/or fencing with columns as approved by staff. Condition 11 ties the open space on the site plan to the site plan that was shown. Condition 12, creeping vines shall be planted to cover retaining and low walls as approved by staff. Condition 13 identifies the specific trees that may be removed. So it was the 6 of the 24 trees that they were requesting to remove. So those exact trees are referenced in that condition. Condition 14, fences and walls visible from the public right-of-way shall be decorative, and unfinished wood fences and decks shall not be visible from the street. Condition 15, HVAC and similar equipment shall not be visible from the public right-of-way. Condition 16 requires garbage pickup from within the development. 17 limits renting of units to no more than 10%. Condition 18 is our standard stream buffer variance mitigation condition. This allows staff to approve the appropriate mitigation, and that could be one of those 4, could be all, or it could be a combination of those. Typically, it is a combination of additional runoff reduction, a buffer set aside, as well as enhanced buffers. And condition 19 was added by Planning Commission. Minimum 4 guest parking spaces shall be provided on the site. And that concludes the presentation. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Mayor Pro Tem Merkel.
Thank you, Michael. How long are the driveways?
They all have the code required 18-foot long driveways.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Michael. I can appreciate the difficulty of this site. Is there any future plans to develop the Haynes Bridge property?
So, of course, we were curious about that as well. According to our request for an answer to that question, the applicant had indicated that there are no plans for that property at this time. They explained in pretty great detail, and they'll probably have some additional information for council. But there's a pretty significant drop off on that property. I want to say it's 10 to 15 feet lower than Haynesbridge Road. So it would require a pretty substantial amount of fill to develop it. But they have not indicated any plans to develop that property.
Okay. And another big concern of mine is it's in the downtown core area. And this does not meet a Tudor style. It does not meet one of our design guidelines for our downtown core. It looks like a modern townhome that you'd see anywhere else, not in our historic core. So what did the downtown architect say about this?
The downtown architect did review this. In fact, the applicant did reach out to the downtown consultant before they even submitted their application, and they worked through comments with the downtown consultant. And the last that I got from the downtown consultant is that he felt that these complied with the downtown requirements.
You've got to be kidding me. It may be time to review him then, because it does not meet those Tudor guidelines. All right, thank you.
Any other? Councilman Dorito.
Thank you, Mayor. First, you had sent us earlier, Mike, an email saying that the site plan was changed. They made some revisions to the site plan. I only have the site plan from April 19th, and that was what was also put in our packet tonight on the desk here. What has changed from the April 19th site plan? Because I don't have the current site plan that you referred to as having changes.
So the site plan, so there's a copy of the applicant's markups at each of your seats, as well as the current site plan. The site plan does have an April, I believe, 19th date on it, but there should be a revision date in there with a revised date of 9/21,
Okay.
I believe.
So they're embedded in this.
Yeah, so
additions.
I can give you a general overview of what the applicant had changed. Basically, what they did is they made some updates to the site plan after Planning Commission. So as a result of Planning Commission adding the condition about 4 guest parking spaces when their site plan only showed 2, so they made some modifications to address the feedback that they got at
From the
Planning
Planning
Commission. And it really, the applicant can identify these as well, but the main change is they did have this fire turnaround right here.
Okay.
That fire turnaround was shown at the very end of the road previously, so they moved it between these 2 units to gain some additional space, and they picked up 3 guest parking spaces for a total of 5. They also made a few little minor modifications along the frontage, just trying to get the greater setback and landscape strip that staff was recommending. So we recommended 20. They really had closer to 15 in this area. So they made some adjustments. They weren't able to get to 20, which is why they're asking you for a change to that condition. But there were some modifications up here as well.
Okay. Regarding the elevations or Exhibit A, I don't know if you want to put that back up there. Last time I was in City Council, 10 years ago, I know we were very sensitive to elevations so that they don't come across looking like a very institutional or like a wall of construction, where we required, I'm not sure what the right term is, and maybe you can tell me what it is, where each unit was shifted back and forward so that you had a visual that was much more aesthetically pleasing. And it looks, though, in Exhibit A that that's not occurring. It looks almost to me, and maybe it's just because it's not 3D or anything, maybe there is some change in, each townhome. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's hard to see here, and I think the applicant should address this as well, Councilman Dorito. But they do show, it's pretty hard to see, but there are some offsets between each unit. So in this area here, and they use some shadowing. This rendering software may not be the best software in order to show that, but they're trying to show that offset by a shadow right there. There's also a slight offset in the roof line right here between these 2 units, and there's a bit of a shadow. Same thing in this area here. So these are meant to stand out. These areas are meant to stand out from the face, as shown on with the shadowing. But, I think the applicant probably can explain that a little bit better.
And just one other question regarding condition 18, as it in regards to the stormwater or the creeks there. I'm not sure what the creek there is connected to, what water basin or what, do you know, or tributary that's feeding into?
I don't know offhand. I can tell you that our stormwater engineer reviewed this and provided feedback. I don't know offhand which stream or what tributary this leads to.
I know she's not here tonight, right? I don't think so.
Bill is not here.
Okay.
No.
I'm just wondering if we should be requiring a hydrology study because of the encroachment on the creek buffer. And we already have issues around the city that have, and I won't mention the location, but we have a location that is, I guess, has some similarities where they have property they can't build on, but they have made it into a beautiful walking area. And they're experiencing some stormwater issues that we're dealing with. It just seems like this condition is very vague and very almost open to whatever the applicant decides to do as far as addressing stormwater issues. And I would prefer that it be a much more stronger condition that we, proactively address that and make sure that before the permits given to commence construction, that we address stormwater issues that the impact of this development may have on the current water basin in the area.
We do require a hydro study. It will be required during the land disturbance permit. Typically, and the reason why we have that condition kind of loose to give staff the approval is because we do need to see the hydro study first before we can determine what is going to be the best mitigation here. So we have been using this condition with the 4 options, A, B, C, and D. And then that just gives the flexibility of Jill to work with the applicant to find the most appropriate mitigation. Most cases, it's been a combination. She's approved a combination of additional runoff reduction as well as buffer enhancement. So if they're encroaching on a buffer, they'll have to find another area of the site that is not currently buffer and dedicate that area as new stream buffer. And then they have to enhance that area with plantings.
Could we, and this might be a question for Ms. Eswine, can we add to this condition to make it a requirement that the resolution to addressing the stormwater impacts of this area and onto the creek, that they are, whatever the solution is accepted and approved by the city before construction could commence?
I think you could do it. I would want to know a few more specifics on who would be in charge of giving that approval. So if you were to amend that condition to add that, I would just want to be clear on how that approval would look. Like, who do you envision giving that say?
Ms. Cook, would you be able to address that at all?
Director Cook, you have the floor.
I think it still would say staff, but it would be our stormwater engineer, which is Jill Bazinet. She would have the expertise to be able to look at that and make that acceptance, if that's okay.
Would you?
I think that would be fun if that's
Would
agreeable
you,
to you.
Ms. Cook, would you be willing to, in the interim before the presentation, write something up that you would be agreeable to for Jill to be able to have some sense of, authority to be able to make sure that we address stormwater issues in this development?
Absolutely.
And that obviously the applicant can decide whether they want to accept that change or not. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions from council? Thank you, Mr. Woodman. Would the applicant like to come forward at this time?
Good evening, members of council. My name is Dina Svetlik. It's S-W-E-T-L-I-K. Address is 3940, thank you, Olympic Boulevard, Suite 400, Erlanger, Kentucky, 41018. So I have the magic button. So I know that Grand Communities and Fisher Homes might be a newer name to the city of Alpharetta, so wanted to provide a little bit of information and background on the company. It's off. There we go. We have a green light. So a little bit of background on Fisher Homes. Fisher Homes is a privately held company based in Cincinnati metropolitan area. The company was founded in 1980 by Henry and Elaine Fisher. The company has built 33,000 new homes in 41 years in business. This is actually our 42nd year in business. We are a top 30 by volume U.S. home builder based on 2019 data, the Builder 100 list in Builder Magazine. We are the 15th largest private home builder. So we are a private company and pay particular attention to neighborhood design and architectural execution. A little bit about the company's giving back. One of the biggest items that the company has been involved with for some time now is with St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. The company has raised over $20 million building 19 homes across a couple of our divisions for St. Jude's. And just this year, we built 3 homes and raised $3.5 million with 3 homes built in Cincinnati, Louisville, and St. Louis. And then there are 2 other giving back contributions in the Cincinnati area. One, Great American Ballpark, a nursing suite, was built at the baseball stadium in Cincinnati, and Family Care Center at Kings Island, the amusement park in Cincinnati, as kind of a gathering point for lost children, diaper change area, et cetera. So the company has 8 divisions. Northern Kentucky is home base, part of Cincinnati Metro. We have a Cincinnati division, the Atlanta division, Columbus, Dayton, Indianapolis, Louisville, and St. Louis. So moving on to this project. So we've named this project The Post, understanding a little bit about Alpharetta's historic trading post location, and so we wanted to play up on that in the naming of this community. We are planning, again, as Michael mentioned, 24 market rate, fee simple, for sale townhomes. And this is, of course, within walking distance to downtown. The Civic Core, it's literally a quarter mile of where we are this evening. And it's very close to access to the Alpha Loop, trailhead on Old Milton Parkway. So understanding all of the constraints on this site that we discovered through our due diligence to date, we really feel like this cluster development that we have in front of you this evening is really the best use of the land in trying to bring additional households and rooftops into walking distance of both downtown and some of the additional retail a little bit further to the east, to Avalon. So we really feel that this is a hamlet within downtown Alpharetta. The fact that the site does drop off a bit, does make it a little bit challenging on the Old Milton side, very challenging on the Haynes Bridge side. That piece on Haynes Bridge does drop off at least 12 feet from kind of the property line down to the bottom of the site there. So again, we really are looking to create a hamlet here, 24 townhomes on a cluster development, really retaining a majority of the site, and wanted to also clarify, and then our consultant, Ken, will address this as well, but the stream that we're asking for the reduction on is an intermittent stream. There's actually 2 streams on the property. There's a perennial stream and an intermittent stream, and we're asking for the reduction on the intermittent stream. So with that, I will turn it over to Kenneth Wood with PEC to go through the remainder of the project. Thank you.
Kenneth Wood, 350 Research Court, Peachtree Corners. Let's make sure I got the click in the right way. Okay. So these are just some different interior photos. I know you guys have. We passed out some packets so you guys were able to see them as we're running through them. Looking at the subject property, as you guys know, I've probably done so many different properties within especially the downtown area here and then going out toward North Point. This property is definitely one of the most funky shape I've ever dealt with. It kind of has the little leg, the different connection. And I've seen it over the years of my career, just different clients asking me to look at the plans for a lot of different uses. And this is definitely the best use for the site. I've looked at it for office, different type of commercials, and it drops so quickly that the amount of fill and the same, even more impact on the stream buffer. But the townhomes were able to kind of step them down the hill and work with the grade, which is really great on this property. And so when we're asked to look at this, that's what really helped in looking at it. This is the existing map where you guys are seeing we're pretty much surrounded by the townhomes, but we love the fact that we have some of the different institutions just to the left and just to the right. It fits within the downtown. Someone living here is, wanting to go to Avalon, wanting to walk to your downtown, but also wanting to use the way we've done the civic area to kind of get away from that, because we do have so much, almost 60 I know by code it's 20% open space, but if you actually look at green space for the site, we're 60 to 70%. It's a massive amount of green space that's being collected on here. And so being able to have that trail that comes down across the creek gives a little bit of a respite away from getting closer to Old Milton. And that was one of the driving design factors from here. This is just showing the mixed use, that we are compliant with that, and that the townhomes are here. And this kind of gives you guys a good depiction. You kind of see the property, and this is kind of what we were working with. When we were looking at the base map, this is what we started with on the property. And so you have the perennial stream that runs along the bottom, and then we tried to use kind of the different colors to show what's floodplain and what's stream buffer, and this is kind of what it looks like. The property on the west that she had mentioned is basically, from an engineering standpoint, I can tell you I don't know how you use it, because it has two driveways and they're 200 feet apart, and then you have this parcel, it has a guardrail. Guardrail's installed because there's a 14-foot drop off down to the bottom, and then it has the stream buffer. And so I don't know how you access getting down with a ramp or how that would be, but it's not a usable track is the way we have looked at it. But there's been a lot of questions, kind of running through that. This is kind of looking at more of the aerial view, so you can see we're able to save a lot of trees on this design, really only kind of impacting a couple of trees up kind of near the front of it. My First Academy that's there right on the left, they really have about the same type of stream buffer issue that we have, and they're in the stream buffer. We're just trying to look at it with obviously the new ordinance and say, how can we add buffer back? There's so many jurisdictions that what I do, if I have to get into buffer because there's an extreme hardship like this where it's size, shape, and topography, then how can we give buffer back? How can we add water quality measures to offset that? And that's what I'll walk you guys through. These are the variances that we talked about for a little bit on the streetscape, the front loaded. It didn't make sense to try to get an alley in between that office building just to be alley fed. It's set up definitely well for that one row to be front loaded, and then the stream buffer variance that we have. This is a look at the plan in general, and so you can kind of tell from the plan, that's where we look and get the 60 to 70% when you're looking at it. We still are able to get in our stormwater management down into the bottom right-hand corner. We still have a lot of room in that area, because what's really nice about it is even though as you get down toward the bottom and you have streams kind of converging, when you get down there, it's actually very walkable, a lot of hardwoods, and it's easy to navigate around. What we did notice, and I'll walk you guys through some of the cleanup that we're looking at for the stream in response to the mitigation, is there's a lot of privet, there's a lot of invasives, and we're talking about getting in there and cleaning that out as we're going through the project. The front four homes face Old Milton. In the recent site plan change, I know there was a couple of questions the council asked about that. Essentially what we did is we tried to take the comments and looked at it and said, how can we make this better? There was a great comment about the two. How can we increase the guest parking? And what we did is we ended up flipping over. That gave 16 and 17 more space between those buildings, which as a corner unit, that's going to give you even more room. That was our fire T, and what that did is it actually gave us a larger amenity space on the left, kind of right behind where the mail kiosk is, and as well as it gave us 3 additional parking spots, which was 1 more than Planning Commission asked for. And that kind of helped set up the plan. The other thing we looked at is we actually pulled the units back away from Old Milton. We originally had it at the 10-foot setback in the code. Michael had mentioned that Chelsea Walk was at 15. That's why we set ours at 15. And so in order to do that, in between Planning Commission and now, as we pulled it back another 5 feet, and that gave us the room. And we wouldn't even we would actually be able to comply with the 20 feet, but looking at current standards where GDOT is today on Old Milton, even only at 24 units, technically 24 units is always tough when you're building that few of units to have like decel lanes and other type of improvements. But GDOT's new policy is they're going to have us do a decel lane, but as it exists today from the original right-of-way, we're 25 feet plus. So if you're looking at some of the other developments that have done the 20 feet, we're definitely more than 20 feet. It's just when GDOT asks us to dedicate that 13 feet of right-of-way, that's where we need the 15 foot that we're asking for. Code is at 10. We're asking for 15 that we went over with staff. If you're looking at the next plan, this is one thing that's out there. So we are proposing to connect in. So when Chelsea Walk was constructed, they went over to the existing single-family house when you're out there, and then it stops. And then there's a big gap between us. And so we're proposing to basically continue that 8-foot sidewalk because we're doing it on our frontage. And this should close, I think, almost everything down to give a continuous sidewalk that's needed for there. And so we are proposing that in what we're looking at. These are just a couple of different views. The renderings are kind of hard. I've actually seen, some different things. They do jut in and out. They do have that complexity to them. I know we got to go through DRB, but they do have that in and out where you're able to see that on the different views. This is the one we were talking about as far as the open space. Kind of setting the code aside for the 20%. We meet all the code. But if you actually just look at the project from an green space standpoint, how much green space is there outside of the impervious area? And this is what was the highest of any project I've ever worked on, is it's over 70% if you just look at green space. And so that funky shape helps that, and the stream buffers obviously, but really the design that we're able to come up with has been very unique for the site and definitely fits on some of the different ones. And this is one I just put in here so you guys can kind of see. Those are the specimens that we're having to take out, but all the green that you see, those are the significant trees that we're able to keep. And so you can see that we're keeping the majority of the entire trees on the site that are of significance through this design. And then this kind of shows you guys, as Michael had showed you in the presentation, this is our amenity area, this is our civic area that we're looking at, and that way you can walk right down from Old Milton and be able to get back there. And since it sits below the road, when you actually walk back there on a site visit, the noise is very different when you're down there that low, and it actually feels really nice. And so that was kind of the driving force for doing this and looking at it. And I also put together, this is basically, where we talked about kind of that mitigation. Like for the stream buffer, what are we doing? And ever since runoff reduction was adopted, your code is as strict as anything in the state in terms of stormwater management, and so we have to comply with that. But in addition, we're also proposing additional water quality measures. And so we're looking at taking out invasive vines. We have the different areas that we're offsetting and adding to the undisturbed buffer. That would be part of the plat to make sure that in perpetuity would not be disturbed. And then I tried to have our artists create a representation. These are some pictures on the left of what the stream looks like today with the privet and some of the different invasive species. And so what we talked about was going in and actually doing some different live staking and putting in native species in the stream area so that as that gets used and it'll get built up over time the way it should be, which is more native. And so with that, I can take any questions you guys may have.
Councilman Hypes.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm interested in what the elevations or what would be seen from Old Milton Parkway. So you've got units 1 through 4 and the side of 24. Is there anything in the packet here that as I'm sitting in traffic on Old Milton and look to my left while I'm at the traffic light, what kind of product of yours that I'm going to be looking at?
I'll let her answer that one on the architecture.
So let me go backwards. So as Michael mentioned in his presentation, the building that you see here is the elevation that would be facing Old Milton. So it's a 4-unit building, and I can walk through a little bit of the articulation on that. And then in your packets, it's not, or, Michael, do you have your exhibit on the side?
We have these. Is this one called the Tustin right here?
Yep.
That's the front.
Can we switch to, yep. So then this one, we didn't have time to have it color rendered for this evening, but this is the proposed side elevation for the front-loaded townhome that would face onto Old Milton. So the building that's siding onto Old Milton Parkway.
The site plan shows some screening along the side of Unit 24 between it and the street, is that correct?
So the 3D illustrative, I think, was primarily done to just show that entrance coming into the site. So we don't have necessarily the detailed landscape plans yet, but we'll certainly work with the conditions that have been identified in terms of landscaping and low walls and fencing along that Old Milton side of the site, and so we'll work through that.
But your code does require that.
So for the Tustin and the 4 units that are actually facing Old Milton Parkway, which if you hang around me long enough, you'll know I call that our front door to the city. When you
Okay.
come off 400, that's how you come into Alpharetta.
Absolutely.
So you're going to be part of our front door.
Yes.
And I'm real interested in what our front door looks like.
So this,
So,
so we can switch back, if we want to switch back to the presentation.
So is there,
So this is that elevation, the Tustin. The rear, this is the alley-loaded townhome that
is there
would
any-
face Old Milton.
is there any patio outside those front doors, or is it just sidewalk to the front door and then you come into the house? Or, I mean, can you?
It's sidewalk to the front door coming into the house. And that would be in that 15-foot landscape strip, so there would be landscaping in the front yard. So between the sidewalk, right, so presuming we have that decel lane, and then we have a sidewalk, and back of the sidewalk where the new lot line would start, there would be a minimum of 15 feet, and that will actually get larger as you move to the west. So anywhere from a minimum of a 15-foot front yard to slightly wider as you're getting to the west, and that will be that landscaped area.
And being townhomes and detached, I assume this will be a covenant-controlled neighborhood?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And if you want me to, I can address the articulation a little bit with this image up as well, if you'd like me to walk through that. So as Michael mentioned as well, so this building is a 4-unit building, and if you, the second, I guess you can't point on this, the second building over, maybe it's better if I use this. If you get to the right one. There we go. Got it. Yep. This one's a little larger. Okay. So this is the 4-unit building that would be facing Old Milton. And as you can see here, the roof line gives you the easiest indication of where the unit is. Again, Michael had mentioned that these are 20 feet wide. So this is the break for the first unit. This is the second, and this is the third. And in terms of articulation in the front of the building, if the second unit over, so this unit here, if this elevation is at 0, then this is at +2, right? So basically this one is at 0, this is at +2, so it actually has a larger footprint at the ground level. And the same thing for the third unit here. This one is at +2 at the ground level. And then the end unit, the upper part of the building is at 0, and then there's an additional articulation here, and this is at +2. Okay? So at the ground level, the footprints of the building go anywhere from the 44 to 46 feet. And then with some of the additional articulations, that's where it gives us variety in our floor plans.
Thank you. Councilman Mitchell?
Thank you for being here tonight. I understand this site is very difficult, and I think if approved, our community should be very happy that the Haynes Bridge site will remain green. And there's a lot of green space and only 6 specimen trees coming out. Those are positives about the project. I understand it dips off and things like that, but can you put the side profile back up again? This is, it just does not comply, and I will be having a discussion with our downtown architect. It does not comply with our downtown historic guidelines. And Tudor eclectic, I don't know, it looks like something you could build in downtown anywhere, USA right now. And not, this looks like the side, I've seen better projects than the side of this, honestly. I really have. I'm surprised it's fine to put a door there, but that does not look like a grand entrance to a beautiful development. It needs another gable, a window gable or a door gable. It needs more stone. It needs a lot of things, and I don't have to design from here because you will go before the design review board. But this does not fit in our historic the guidelines, and it shouldn't have come before us tonight looking like this. And I apologize to you all that it did, but I can't support it like this. Are you willing to change this to make it more historic looking?
So if you have some specific comments, we will certainly take those into consideration in our preparation for the DRB.
Okay, the brook line, there's nothing Tudor about the brook line.
So
The way those gables meet up, it looks so modern. I've seen better stuff coming out of Chamblee, Georgia lately that looks more historic, and I don't, this is an internal problem, and I get it, and I'm not trying to take it out on you all, but the Tustin, the next one, the Brookfield, Brookline, see how those meet up in the middle? There's no articulation there. It doesn't look like different units. And there's nothing to differentiate those condominiums. And I think that's why people in our community are getting tired of condominiums after condominiums, because there's no real articulation and there's not a lot of stone. And where you did use the stone, it's going to be downstream and you won't even see it from Old Milton. So I don't know. Are you willing to change those things and work on that?
we can take a look at it. I will go back to our architecture team. I will say, as Michael had noted, that we've been in correspondence with the city's consultant, and literally before even making an application to the city, in looking at the Tudor eclectic style category within the downtown guidelines.
He must not understand that it's not supposed to look modern. It's supposed to look like the founding of our city during that era, during that design phase. And I'll be in discussion with him about that as well. But, all right, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much. Councilman Dorito.
Just for the record, I don't know if you heard my question to Ms. Cook earlier. Are you fine with tightening up that condition? I'm not trying to make it difficult.
Stormwater?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just want to make sure it's addressed properly on the front end.
Bill all the time.
Okay.
For sure.
Thank you. And I'll just make a comment. Similar to what was just mentioned, and I brought this up about the elevations. They do look very, just look like, need some help. It doesn't, whether you keep this type of style or not, even the 2 feet between, jutting out from each unit and stuff, I don't think 2 feet's going to do a lot of removing that visual of just having a wall of townhomes. And as mentioned by another member of the council earlier, that this is kind of a focal point of the city. This is where we enter city center, and so it's very important that the architectural side of this application is addressed in a way that meets the standards that have been talked by others.
Well, I know, so, we felt strongly the design is the right project, the way the site lays out, what we've proposed. If there's comments on architecture, I know we can look at those, but we definitely would not want to.
And it's not up to us to design it, but you're going to go before the design review board, so maybe that's the place to discuss or show the changes that you might be willing to make.
Yep.
Sure, well, we'd love any comments so we know where they would be, because we know the site is the right site for this use.
Right. And we did look through, look through the guidelines in terms of maximum number of materials, right? So we understand that's a concern. That is a concern of mine as well. We don't want to have too many materials. Things will look very eclectic very quickly when you do that. So this meets the requirements in terms of maximum number of materials. And we also do have a substantial amount of masonry. So it's a combination of both brick and stone that's been integrated into the elevations.
See it. A little bit on that.
On that one, yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Cook, if you could, I'd like to follow up with you on something right quick before we go to the public. And so you've heard the concerns from council on this item, and what I'm trying to figure out is, based on the comments I've heard, do you think this is anything that can be resolved at DRB? Because we're talking about some pretty major concerns about those end units facing Old Milton.
I think it is, but I think, Councilman Mitchell's is correct. I mean, it doesn't look like historic Tudor. It is a Tudor, but it's more contemporary, and that's something that we should have caught, even though that the consultant had looked at that. So that's something that before we send it to DRB, we can make sure that, at least in general, it meets that historic architectural requirement. And I did see some red lines that the applicant had given to mayor and council, and on one of them, they had added a red line on number 2, where they had asked for basic approval of the facades. So I would recommend that if you approve this, that you don't include that additional sentence to number 2. Do you have that? So we would actually hold it, staff would, until they meet the historic Tudor architectural requirement, and then send it to the DRB for the final review. On number 2, they had added, the elevations attached as Exhibit A represent facade treatment acceptable to the city. So I would recommend that you not include that if you're looking at their red line recommendations.
Based on the comments you've heard to this point, would you recommend any additional changes to the conditions?
The only other change that I would recommend, and it was something because Councilman Dorito had asked for it to just be clearer, you could certainly add to number 18, applicant shall prepare a hydrology study for staff approval. Now, that's already required, but if you wanted to put it in there, to make sure that the other mitigations do not mean that you don't have to do the hydrology study. So for number 18, it would just be adding the applicant shall prepare a hydrology study for staff approval.
May I comment on that, Mayor? I didn't want to be out of order. Can I respond to Ms. Cook?
Please.
I'd rather have that in here. I know it's going to be required by our stormwater engineer, the city stormwater, and your department. So, but I think when you read this, it looks as though one could interpret it as this is all they have to meet.
Right, in lieu of.
Yeah,
So that would
I don't
make
think it hurts
clear.
putting it in here as long as the applicant is fine with that.
I agree, because that's something they would have to do by our code anyway.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Merkel, did you have any clarifications you wanted to make at this point?
No, thank you.
Councilman Wolf?
Director Cook, I just want to be clear on what you just said. So you said, based on what Donald brought up, that we may have missed the exact styling it was supposed to be. And would you then say that had you caught that, you would not have recommended this to come before council tonight?
I would have requested that the applicant make some revisions. We don't always have final design approval when we come to council. It'll always say that it has to go to DRB for final approval.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have pushed for additional changes on the architecture.
I feel like we have so many issues that might need some more work before we can vote on it. That's my take.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Ms. Cook. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
However, if anyone's here and would like to come forward and speak on this item, now is your opportunity to do so. Seeing no one, we will close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I'd offer a motion this evening to approve Z-22-13, V-22-25 Grand Communities at 2325 Old Milton Parkway, subject to the following conditions that were read here tonight, with the exception of adding to number 18, that a hydrology study shall be conducted by the applicant and submitted to staff for approval prior to recommendations on the 4 options given in number 18.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Dorito.
May I ask a question before y'all get going? Is that intended to be the conditions read by staff or the red line? I didn't have a copy of the red line, so I just wanted to make sure we were clear on that.
The conditions are provided by staff, including red lines.
Okay. And is that, and I'm sorry, I don't have a
Condition.
copy of the red line, so I just wanted to make sure. I think Ms. Cook said something about not accepting the condition in 2, I think. Was it 2, Kathy?
It wasn't
correct.
removed here.
You're correct. On number 2, the applicant had requested adding the elevations attached as Exhibit A represent facade treatment acceptable to the city. So although we're okay with the other red lines, that is the number 2, we did not want to include that red line.
I would readdress my motion to approve Z-2213-/V-22-25 Grand Communities, 2325 Old Milton Parkway, subject to the following conditions as read before you this evening, with the following exceptions or changes. Number 2, remove the red line condition that says the elevations attached as Exhibit A represent facade treatment acceptable to the city. Number 18, add the language stating that a hydrology study should be conducted by the applicant and submitted to staff for approval prior to administering the 4 options for mitigating stream buffer.
Reiterate my second.
Is everyone clear on the motion?
Mr. Mayor, in number 2, I apologize. Number 2, it also references Exhibit A and that it should be substantially similar. Are we okay with keeping that language?
Yes.
Is everyone clear on the motion?
I would like to make a friendly amendment that we motion that, or a friendly motion that we remove the language that says that it's substantially similar to the designs that we see until it's had a chance to be reviewed by DRB and staff.
No, I would not accept that.
Okay. Then I'd like to make another motion that we table it until such time as these items can be worked out. Because apartment 24.
Well, we're not allowed to discuss a motion to table. We have a motion to table. Do we have a second? Second. We have a motion to table and a second.
Mayor, is that, are we postponing indefinitely, or is there a date in mind?
I was going to try to clarify that. So if we don't want to have to advertise it and bring it up at the next meeting, then we need to postpone it indefinitely or set a date, postpone it till a certain time.
I'm fine with tabling it until the next meeting or indefinitely.
So, but what we're saying is we have dug a little deeper into Robert's Rules of Orders, and tabling technically means it's coming up at the next meeting. And so, however, if we want to give it more time, our city attorney is recommending that we motion to postpone it indefinitely or to set a date.
Right. So either one is fine. I just want to make sure we know what your intent is of when you want it to come back.
I just want to give them and staff enough time to address these issues. So indefinitely is fine.
Okay. That's fine, Mayor.
Okay, so we have a motion to postpone indefinitely. Does second still hold? Motion by Councilman Mitchell, a second by Councilman Will to postpone indefinitely. Now, since it's postponing indefinitely and not tabling, are we allowed to discuss that? Pardon?
Yes, that's fine.
Discuss what?
The table.
Well, with the table motion, we're not allowed to discuss, but if it's a postpone indefinitely, it can be discussed. So, any discussion?
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem Markle.
I appreciate the passion that comes from leaders in this city. The city looks amazing for a reason, and it's a lot of reasons. It's not the people up here. I don't think we have any architects up here. I'm an insurance agent. What do I know? But I drive by things that are nice and things that we've approved in the past. I do my own research. The part that troubles me with this right now is that these folks came all the way from Kentucky or Ohio because a architectural firm that quote unquote represents the city told them this was okay. And if people up here want to second guess after the CCIM meeting went through with no apparent objections as far as I know, staff went through it, staff confirmed with the architect, it met one of the requirements, okay. It went to Planning Commission. Planning Commission recommended approval based on this information. And then to have these people come down here tonight thinking, we did what you told us to do, and now you're sending us home because you don't like what we did, even though what we did you told us to do. So the different facets from the staff, CZIM opportunities, Planning Commission, and now I have enough trust in the getting a little worked up here. Planning Commission put it through Design Review Board, DRB. You know, if you want to make recommendations, they've already indicated. You've already taken language out of this. And now we're going to send them back home. They can fly home tomorrow and say, we got to come back. We just don't know when, even though we really didn't change anything or do anything different than what we were told was acceptable. So I'm sensitive to that part of it. Do I like it? I don't know. I don't have that vision to know what it's going to look like when it hits the ground. Yes, it's the self-proclaimed entrance to the city in a lot of ways. You know, we got a quick trip on the entrance to the city. So I get it. We don't want to put anything out there that I think is detrimental to the view, to the look of the city, the pattern. But this is a piece of property that's been sitting here forever. My kids went to that grade school or that nursery right next door. They're both out of college. So it's been sitting a lot longer than that. And finally, we have a creative use for it. I've never met these people tonight. I don't know anything about your company. It's all new to me today. But I did do my research with Kathy and the department and read through everything, most everything, and I don't see how you're shutting this thing down or tabling because somebody doesn't like the look of the architecture in the front one that's already been approved by an architect that works for the city saying it does meet our code. So there may be some things in our code you don't like, and if that's the case, change the code. But don't tell somebody as long as you meet these requirements, you should be fine. If you had a problem with the stream buffer variance or landscape strips or something else, then I get it. I'd be up here with you. But that's not the basis. The basis is you don't like it. You don't like it because you don't like the way it looks, even though it was told to them by multiple people, this is acceptable in the downtown code. So to table it so they can go back and make it something you like, it doesn't fly with me.
Councilman Binder, and then I believe Councilman Hypes was next.
Yeah, so normally I would agree with those statements. I served on DRB before. I sometimes wonder how I got there, but they got plenty of architects and landscape architects to work with you. But the eye-opener for me was when I think Councilmember Will asked directly to our director if you would have known that information now, would you have changed it? You know, and she said yes. So that to me is eye-opening. That's never happened during this time, and that thing happened. So sometimes the work was completed, but submitted, but it was incomplete in this case. So that's why I'm in favor with tabling it, so we get our act together. You're not going to find me designing from the dais on there. I trust DRB, but I at least want to make sure staff and the applicant feel comfortable on that one.
Councilman Hypes.
I'd like to, echo what Councilman Merkel said in terms of you all coming down here and presenting this. you know, I recognize that this is a big investment in a new market for your company. And, you know, as folks in business, I recognize that you guys want to get it right. And I know that we as a city want to get it right. And it's an important, prominent parcel of property, and it's a very difficult piece of property. And based on some of the Q&A and just the presentation of the motion itself, it was, for me, somewhat unclear what I was voting to approve. There was a lot of wiggle room, so to speak, in terms of what was being approved, what would be decided after the fact, what things would be included in there. And, you know, I think it clearly is an inconvenience for you all to come back, and I want to acknowledge that. But I do believe it's in everybody's interest, both your company, but certainly the city of Alpharetta, to get this project right. And when it does come up for a vote, I want to have some clarity about what it is I would be voting on. So, you know, for those reasons, I encourage the applicant and community development to hammer through some of these details. And whether we're critical of our own people or not, I'll just chalk that up to be that is highly unfortunate. That's not a substitute for not getting it right, in my opinion, on a prominent parcel like that. So, thank you.
Councilman Mitchell.
And I concur. We're not trying to make it harder on you all than it has to be, but obviously there's been some oversight and things that have been missed from our code. Our code is crystal clear about our design guidelines and our historic district. That's crystal clear. The fact that it was missed by both our staff and our architect, it leaves some issues that I won't belabor on, but if we were willing to take out the part where the renderings were not substantially similar, I wouldn't feel the need to table it. But because Councilman Merkel chose not to do that, then I feel the need to table it. And it's as simple as that. So thank you. We're left with these buildings for 50 to 100 years. We want to get them right. And that's what makes Alpharetta different, is because we have design lines, the design guidelines, but we also adhere to them. And in this case, we're not. So.
Councilman Dorito.
You know, I don't want the applicant to leave here tonight, a representative of the applicant, without acknowledging the legacy giving program at Fisher Homes. And please let them know that I found that to be quite nice that you included that in your presentation, because that's extremely important. And it demonstrates the values of the culture of the company that wants to come and invest in Alpharetta. I also want to thank you for going through the path of investing in Alpharetta, but like others on the council, and I've done this in the past, if one of my colleagues on the council has concerns about anything that we're discussing, I've always supported any motion of tabling, because there's obviously reasons why that council member or council members want to do that. I think it's part of our you know, our role up here is to discuss and debate, make sure that we get the best product for our citizens here in Alpharetta. And if we were going to vote on this tonight, I would support it. I do like the project, and I trust the DRB would have done their job to address some of the concerns that's been expressed. But the fact that there are council members up here that want to table this and give this some more additional time, I don't think that's a bad thing for anybody, even the applicant. So I will support the tabling of this item.
Anyone else? I'll just say that I do agree with most of what Councilman Dorito just said, as far as generally, unless I feel passionately, I defer to someone on council who does have those concerns. And I'll also say that one of the reasons I will support the motion to postpone indefinitely is because I'm not confident that if we force this vote tonight, that our applicants will not be leaving with a no. And I think that would be more tragic with a project that has been thought out so well, to be so close for us to deny it as a group, because I don't get a sense that there's clear consensus to approve it, and I would hate to have this application denied when we have an opportunity to answer some questions for those who are concerned. So I will support it in this case. That being said, is everyone clear on the motion to postpone indefinitely? All those in favor, please vote yes, otherwise vote no. And it does pass, 6-1. So that'll wrap up the public hearing. As I mentioned before, the other applicant, PH-21-06 Kairos Thompson Street Flats, changed its condition of zoning, was withdrawn, and the applicant has asked for it to be considered at a future time. So we'll move on to old business, and the first item up is PH-22-10/Unified Development Code UDC Text Amendment Banner Signs. This is the second reading. Ms. Cook, I believe you have this item.
So usually with second readings, I won't have a presentation, but this time we do have a change. And this was actually something that was brought up at the first reading, and it was a request to change number 2 under A2. So it previously said the subject roadway construction is planned to continue for 6 months or more following the date of the request for an extension for a banner. So there was a request at the first reading to change the 6 months to 3 months. So that's the only change that we have. And of course, I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Cook at this time? Thank you, Ms. Cook. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, sir.
However, if there's anyone here that did want to come forward and speak on this item, now's your chance to do so. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Mr. Mayor, if following.
We have to let the attorney read the ordinance aloud.
Thank you. And before I do, I wanted to address one other thing. I think Councilman Dorito had asked me to look into whether we could require any specific content saying that the banner had to be advertising the business as open, and in confirming what the state of the law is about it being content neutral. We just couldn't get comfortable with that. So I think that, I mean, as Ms. Cook indicated, that was the only change, was the 6 months to 3 months. So with that, I'll do the second reading. An ordinance to amend Article 2 of the Unified Development Code of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, to amend regulations pertaining to banner signs, to repeal conflicting ordinances, and for other purposes.
Thank you very much. Ms. Shapiro?
We have no public comments.
But if anyone would like to come forward and speak on the UDC change, now's your chance. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I'd offer a motion tonight to approve the second reading of PH-22-10, Unified Development Code Text Amendment Banner Signs, noting the change from last meeting that the period will go from 6 months in construction to a minimum of 3 months in construction.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel, second by Councilman Hypes, by a nose. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve as outlined by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. Mayor Pro Tem, and it is unanimous. So that'll wrap up the old business portion of tonight's meeting. We'll move on to new business. First item under new business is Design Services Pedestrian Safety Improvements, RFQ 22-1007. Director Sisevich, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is the Design Services Pedestrian Improvements in downtown. You may recall part of T-Splosh 2 consisted of improvements along Academy Street as well as the Marietta at Roswell Street intersection. Also in the capital, FY23 capital project was the retaining wall, I won't call it a wall, in front of the Village Green, Town Green, as a protection barrier, and we lumped that with this project to make it more conducive of having more firms submit proposals for us. Went through the process. Moffett and Nickel was the highest ranking firm and had the lowest cost for the overall project. And in the last month, Kathy Cook and Community Development have been working on a downtown Alpha Loop conceptual study, linking, trying to figure out where the Alpha Loop needs to go through downtown, and one of those locations is down Roswell Street. And so Public Works asked for a proposal, cost estimate from Moffett and Nickel to add this component to the plan so that we would not preclude the Alpha Loop from coming down Roswell Street in the future. Our concern in Public Works is we designed the intersection improvement, safety improvement, and then a year or 2 years down the road, the Alpha Loop comes through and it may require the removal of what was just installed. So we're trying to be proactive in that and utilize funds accordingly to plan for the Alpha Loop going down there. There's no construction funding for this, but we could have it included in the design plans. The schedule is long, it's 17 months, but a lot of that deals with permitting, a lot of it deals with getting approval from GDOT, requiring some utility relocations, but our first priority is the wall in front of the Village Green. That'll be priority number 1.
Thanks, sir. Any questions from council? Councilman Will?
So as I read this, and the bid price from Moffett, it looks like was $200,000. That's the contractor we chose, correct?
Correct.
And then it appears, and I know you just covered this, but I want to say it again for simplicity purposes, that we are also essentially throwing in a blank check for another $79,000 for work that might potentially need to be done maybe in the future, and you don't want to come back to council and have to get a change order to pay for it. Is that correct?
We are, I want to say it's a blank slate, but we're
$79,000 sort of whatever kind of check.
A majority of that cost is the surveying that needs to take place between Old Mill Parkway and Old Roswell Street for this area, and then the design work on top of that. We can easily remove that component from it.
And I say that because the language actually says we may not use this if it becomes unnecessary. And, I
think what we're trying to get through with that was that we may not use those designs moving forward with the construction of the intersection projects. We may not have the funding for that at that time. So what our goal is not to preclude the Alpha Loop, to design it as part of the intersection improvement. It may look a little weird, may look a little different, but in the future, it'll all play out.
I would say my preference is if we have a $200,000 contract, we should approve the $200,000 contract. And if we need to do the rest of this at a later time because it becomes necessary, then that should come back before council for approval. That's just my suggestion. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Thank you, Mr. Savage. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on that item?
We do not, sir.
But if anyone here would like to come forward and speak on the design services for the pedestrian safety improvements, now's your chance. Pardon? You have a question? Well, I see no one from the public, so we'll close public comment, and I believe Councilman Hypes has a question.
Director Pete, we have our occasional offline discussion, and this safety wall between the town green and Highway 9 is near and dear to my heart. And it's primarily, to keep kids and balls from going into the street and things of that nature. Any chance that gets done before August of next year? I'm looking at your timeline, and I'm just beside myself that given why we want to build that wall or that barrier, maybe that's even a better word for it, is there a way to fast track that without, blowing the budget? I'll go build it by August of 23. Yeah, so, get a Boy Scout project going here or something.
So,
be a lot cheaper. Cheap labor.
I'm sorry. You were going to give me a serious answer. I apologize.
No worries.
Let's try to keep things moving here.
So 140 of those days is utility coordination.
Okay.
So that section of State Route 9 and City Center has numerous utilities that unfortunately we do not know the exact location of. So what we're, part of the design is going out there, potholing and coordinating with all the utility companies and making sure that with our luck lately, wherever we want to put this wall is right where all the utilities probably want to be, or currently are. So we're going to pothole the area, figure out how deep the utilities are, relocate the utilities if we have to as part of it. That takes considerable time because they don't always reach back to you within a timely manner.
As usual, there's a perfectly good explanation for everything. I've seen some napkin sketches of what we might do out there, and so I just...
No, we will expedite with the utility contractors that we have. This was the vendor's schedule that they submitted with their proposal, and they're unaware that we have, with our right-of-way encroachment permits and our utility contacts, ways of expediting things.
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, we want to have this done yesterday.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Pete on this? Thank you, Pete.
Yes, sir.
We've already been to public comment, so I'll go ahead and call for a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve the award of RFQ 22-1007, Pedestrian Safety Improvement Design Services, and Roswell Street Alpha Loop Design Services, Old Milton Parkway to Old Roswell Street to Moffett and Nicole in the amount of totaling $272,000, and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
Have a motion by Councilman Dorito, second by Mayor Pro Tem Merkel. Any discussion? Councilman Will.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment to remove the $72,000 for the work that is not actually set to be done right now, and amend this to $200,000.
Before I accept that, I just want to confirm, Pete, that you're okay with that if we did that?
We just won't incorporate the Alpha Loop in the design at all. So
Was any
strictly,
issues or problems?
It may. And the reason why I say that is the concept from the downtown pedestrian study that was done years ago is a raised intersection. So the best example to give you a raised intersection is the Milton High School campus, their driveway. They have they have two raised intersections between Birmingham and Freemanville Road. And so that is the preferred approach moving forward. We would, if we need to purchase right-of-way for this intersection, it would be conducive to purchase all the right-of-way that we would need at once, instead of coming back, but at the same time, we can actually just design the 6-foot wide sidewalk in this area and go from there, instead of the 12-foot Alpha Loop.
But I'm not prepared to accept the change.
So we do have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. And it does pass unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Pete. Next item up is Design Project Management Services change orders to Webbridge Road, North Point Parkway to city limits.
Yes.
Councilman Will.
Mr. Mayor, I need to recuse myself from this vote. I am actually in negotiations with Pond Architectural Firm for 2 projects I'm doing. So.
Thank you, sir. Pete, you have the floor.
All right. So this is the Webbridge Road Corridor project, and to remind everybody, this is from North Point Parkway all the way to city limits going east. So North Point Park. It's broken up into 3 distinct phases. Phase 1, I don't want to confuse what they have here, but phase 1 was the section we actually just finished construction of it. That's the Greenway connection from this existing sidewalk down. Phase 2 is a roundabout at Webbridge Way. And that also leads with a 10-foot wide sidewalk to the park, to Webbridge Park. That phase is being bid out this week. So it's going out to bid right now. We are in the final stages of acquiring the right-of-way. Phase 2B is the remainder of the bid agreement from the tunnel to Webbridge Way. That is 41 parcels to get right away from. We have have acquired a few of those parcels. Councilman Dorito and I have met with a property owner as well out there, and part of this change order reflects revising plans to accommodate realistic and viable wishes of the property owners. So when we met with this one property owner, we're going to have to reduce the sidewalk. They have a nice fence. They have very mature landscaping. When we have not gotten a full-blown appraisal of cost to cure, but it would cost us more to purchase the right-of-way and the easements because of the landscape that would be removed than what this change order is for. So it's a good, in our world, it's a good use of funds because we're going to cost us less money at the end of the day. The property owner is much more receptive to work with us. It requires us to revise the plans to reflect a smaller beauty strip and a smaller width sidewalk from 10 feet to 8 feet in a small stretch, about 150 feet. But all the plans have to be redone. The hydraulics, the gutter spread calculations, the typical sections, the erosion control plan, everything needs to be revised. As well as then Atkins is going to come back and they're going to help tweak everything, make sure everything is correct so when we go out to bid, we have all the correct quantities. The final phase is the section from North Point Parkway to the Greenway. That is the bridge. That too is going out to bid next week, or this week, excuse me. So we're going to have bookends out to bid and bids in at the end of October, which will be very exciting. Fingers crossed everything comes in within our budget that we have allocated. And in that section there, Atkins is much more in tune to oversee the questions from the bidders regarding the bridge construction. They have the specialty in that area where we do not have somebody on staff capable of answering those questions. And they'll also help out with going through the bids and making sure that they're accurate and that everything's been accounted for. So the request tonight is for Pond and Company to revise drawings while working on the right-of-way acquisition phase, and Atkins funds for them to continue their project management as well as assisting in the bid preparation and reviewing the bid documents for the bridge phase.
Any questions from Pete or for Pete? Councilman Binder.
So these change, I know you went through them like based on property owners and that. So the change requests they've made have been within reason based on the change of the environment, of whether landowners or we realize something or not.
Yeah, so what happened is when they did the plans, they basically did the typical section and graded everything out, and it shows that we need significant easements or property right away, and a retaining wall won't solve it, so it's very mature landscaping in this area, and the cost to cure is quite intense.
Okay. And the Atkins is part of project management. Typically, like when you just tell me, you know, hey, Binder, design is a percentage of construction. That's what it is. In this case, project management's more expensive than the change order. Is that because it's two different things, two different scopes, or because they're doing a catch-up because they didn't ask from the last time
They
Pond
didn't,
made changes?
a little bit of both.
Okay.
They didn't feel like they felt they had the funds in the account. Unfortunately, that didn't turn out to be the case. And two is this has gone through multiple revisions. If you recall, we had an 8-foot wide sidewalk on one side, 6 foot on the other. Then we went 8 and 8, and then we went 10 and 10. So it's not catch up, but in the sense that they've done a lot, and we're trying to really get focused on the bid aspect of the project.
And we're locked in on our revisions pretty good. I know we're getting there.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the total price from them, and this project's been going on for 4+ years.
Yep.
It's.
No, I understand. It goes kind of both ways of, hey, we're trying to figure out what the scope is, the expectations, but as far as what the scope of this project's going to be and what bridge as a whole, we've locked in on.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there'll be certain parcels where things will go from 10 feet to 8-foot sidewalks if we have to in one area. It's a lot like Rucker, where you have some areas where there's no beauty strip, and some areas there is a beauty strip.
Correct.
So.
Okay.
But predominantly, it's a 6-foot beauty strip with a 10-foot wide sidewalk.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Pete on this item? Thanks, sir. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
We do not, sir.
But if anyone here would like to come forward, now's your opportunity. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mayor. Move to approve the following change orders in accordance with the city's procurement policy. A, change order number 3 to purchase order 1900583 for Pond and Company in the amount of $25,710 for design revisions to the Webbridge Road Greenway to Webbridge Way. B, change order number 2 to purchase order 1900584 for Atkins in the amount of $36,700 for additional project management services, and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Dorito, a second by Councilman Binder. Any discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
Councilman Dorito.
I just want to acknowledge, Pete, the tremendous work you did. We did meet with these residents who had very severe concerns regarding the impact to their, it's a beautiful piece of property along Webbridge Road. And Pete listened to their concerns, and from an engineering perspective, in layman's terms, explained to them what was happening. They couldn't have gotten enough of just direct information from the city. And Pete, I want to thank you for that. Said he would go back to the drawing board. We think at least that little segment along Webbridge Road, see what can be done to help mitigate some of the concerns of these neighbors. And in fact, had the fencing and the beautiful, trees that are along their frontage right now, they would have been removed. It actually would have unbeautified the area versus what we're trying to do is beautify along Webbridge Road. So it was a great solution that Pete came up with, and the reason for the change order, as he outlined, and ultimately the savings to the city from the cost of taking over that property, the right of way. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Team effort.
Any other discussion? Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Everybody clear on the motion? Motion was to approve with conditions that were outlined by Councilman Dorito. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. And it does pass unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor Council.
Ms. Eswine, do you mind? Next item up on the new business is MS-ISAC Security Software.
Good evening again. The IT department is asking you to authorize the purchase of CIS Albert MD Appliance Primary Sensor System from CIS in the amount totaling $34,200. I'll be happy to answer any questions on it.
Do we have any questions for staff on this item? Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery, for being here tonight. I want to bring clarity, or try to bring clarity to why this is not a budgeted item, but you're asking for it tonight. You asked earlier that the roughly $200,000 be put in our previous budget for 24-hour security. Can you explain how this will address part of that concern?
Sure. So when that didn't happen, we sort of pivoted to what we were planning to be as a phase 2. This was kind of a phase 2 to that larger project. This gives us that 24-hour monitoring on a very specific type of activity that they'll be monitoring. It's not the full scope of what we will be looking at in what we were trying to do in the last budget cycle. And so given the current security posture, the way things are, our current limitations, we wanted to go ahead and see if we can do this from a security perspective, get some 24-hour monitoring today, fill a gap we don't have today. We began to have discussions in June, July with the MSISAC, talking more in detail about Albert, and then followed that up with a number of discussions with security professionals, and without doubt, they all were immediately, you need to do this right away. And so that was the impression we got. We confirmed it with our peers. I had a conversation with the state CISO. where the state also uses this. It's a secondary tool, kind of how we're imagining it as well. But I think in the interim, given the cost, this is where we needed to be. And given the threat today, we need to do it immediately if we can.
So this also met the recommendation of the review committee that we had hired, the consultants.
The layer 3, no, this was not something that was discussed with them at all. What was discussed with them was the larger scope. That was their recommendation. We agreed with that, but this was sort of again, most private entities probably don't even understand what this is. As we talked to a few folks and had to describe it to them, hey, we're going to have access into the federal SOC here with some of this. Every single one of them said, you need to do this right away. And so that's why we're here.
And one last question. Explain the SOC to the public.
My apologies. I keep, cyber professionals seem to love acronyms, and I'm somewhat new to this field myself, and I still can't get used to them. The SOC is the Security Operations Center.
And this particular apparatus will only address 24-hour security within our firewall.
Right.
Correct?
So it's 2 appliances. We have 2 ISP locations today. So we have to buy 2 devices. Basically, all the traffic that routes through our firewall in both locations will be forwarded to the device, and then they'll forward that up to their monitoring server, the SOC, that they have, and notify us of any issues.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Councilman Dorito.
Yeah, obviously, I think this is a good thing because it's taken on its own life of its own globally around the world. I know my firm, we invest a significant amount of money in cybersecurity because of all the client information we have and personnel information and what have you. And we actually test our system and we meet standards even higher than the Defense Department in the United States. And I guess my question to you is, I look at 34,200. I know you came here with 200,000, I guess, in the budget cycle. I can't remember when that came before us, but
yes.
I think part of the reason why I guess the council at the time decided not to move forward is I think there's a lot of confusion, and maybe there's confusion tonight as to what we're really trying to do here. And so at some point, I'd like you to think about, an IT plan of cybersecurity and how we can have it reviewed and tested and have people actually try to hack our systems. There's parties that do that, and then they tell you what you need to improve and stay ahead of the curve, because there's all sorts of ways people get into your systems these days, and it would be such a costly event had someone, in effect, took our systems hostage, as we're hearing a lot about around the country and around the globe. So I'm all in favor of supporting this. I just think we probably need to do more, or at least come up with a strategy or plan to make sure that we're addressing as best as possible, protecting our data and our systems and all the confidential information we should be protecting.
That is music to my ears, yes. I'll be happy to sit down and talk with the council at any time to get a discussion around the things we're operating on, we're working on. Trying to address the first statement you made there, which was getting a grasp of what we're trying to do tonight. This is a monitoring service of data coming in and out of our network, right? And the uniqueness of this is that the data is being fed into the federal SOC. And so when the NSA declassifies something, they're the first to see it. Before any of the private other places get it, our federal SOC is very good. And so that's the unique part to this that I think we really need to jump at, and why it's being offered to only local governments. This is part of, I think it was in the packet, all of the documents that was passed around by the federal government. I think this originally started out as a program out of the Bush era and Department of Homeland Security, and it's now made its way down to the Center for Internet Security, and they've made this available to now state and local governments. And many states have adopted it as a state as a whole. Unfortunately, Georgia hasn't quite done that yet and provided it to all their cities, but we don't want to wait around for that. We want to do it.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any more questions? Councilman Binder.
Question for Molly on that. Is security, is that available as a reason for an executive session to be able to ask questions that
Yes.
we would want?
It can be. If you need me to tell you the specifics, I can.
I like Councilmember Dorito's point, and then to meet one-on-one, but it may be good for the group of us to have a meeting on it where we can be safe to ask questions that we wouldn't necessarily want the answers to be public.
Yes, the cybersecurity exemption allowing for executive session discussions is actually a fairly new addition, I think within the past year or two. So I'm not as familiar with the details on it.
Maybe
I can look into it.
Maybe we can work into that and see how we could have a meeting on that. Because I know a lot of times I feel where I don't want to exactly ask all the questions I would like to ask.
I'm trying to be as vague as I can at times.
Yep.
Yeah.
Understand.
You know,
Any other
as much as I
questions?
can without giving away our issues, right?
Any other questions for Mr. Montgomery? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards on this?
We do not, sir.
However, if anyone would like to come forward and make a comment about MS ISAC security software, now's your chance. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask the council to please approve the purchase of the CIS Albert MD appliance primary sensor system from the Center for Internet Security Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $34,200.
I have a motion by Councilman Mitchell, a second by Councilman Will. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. Councilman Will?
He's been hacked. So, where's Albert?
There we go. And it does pass unanimously. Next, we'll move on to item D under new business, and that's the Windward Highway 9 Area Strategic Master Plan. Director Cook.
Mayor and Council, the next item before you is to consider authorizing funding for an amount totaling $60,000 to participate in a Windward Highway 9 Master Plan LCI update study. And this would be a group study with the North Fulton CID as well as the City of Milton. And the map that I have up here tonight, it shows the area that would be included within that study. And back in 2011, we actually partnered with the City of Milton. And at that time, we were successful with a grant that was given to us by the Atlanta Regional Commission. And we included all the area west of Georgia 400. So this is a larger study. When we went back and spoke to the North Fulton CID as well as Milton, we wanted to make sure that we included the area of Windward that was located to the east of 400. So it was important that we capture this entire corridor. You had authorized us back in February to apply for a grant for the Atlanta Regional Commission. We did find out through the North Fulton CID that we were not successful. We had submitted at that time for a larger amount than what we're asking for tonight. I believe that the amount that we had was approved in February was around $300,000 that we were going to request. Of course, that was going to be just a shared application, and our match would have been around $20,000. So since we weren't successful, we did go back to the North Fulton CID, and they agreed to pull this together, and we would go forward as a team, the three of us, for the update. And why is it important that we go back as an update instead of just looking at the city of Alpharetta? It's because we want to be able to apply for grants as they come up through the Atlanta Regional Commission. If you think about the North Point LCI, we went through that 10-year update in 2018, and we've been pretty successful in applying and receiving around $7 million from that LCI. So approved LCI livable centers initiatives are eligible for those Atlanta Regional commission grants. So the request is up to $60,000 to participate in that study with the City of Milton and the North Fulton CID. Of course, there would be, as part of the study, it would include an updated market study and branding strategy for the area, strategies for integrating the planned BRT station and providing first, last mile connectivity, an updated approach to land use and transportation that evolves the area from a place that's more auto-oriented to a walkable, transit-supported place. And of course, we would come up with a 5-year action plan. That 5-year action plan would give vision and direction on what projects that we should pursue to have the biggest impact. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer those.
Any questions from council on this item? Thank you, Director Cook. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
We do not, sir.
However, if anyone would like to come forward and speak on the LCI application, now's your chance. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I'd offer a motion this evening to approve agenda item titled Windward Highway 9 East Strategic Master Plan Approval of authorizing funding in amount of total of $60,000 to participate in the Windward Highway 9 Master Plan LCI Update Study in partnership with the North Fulton CID and the City of Milton.
I have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Markle, a second by Councilman Will, and that was to approve the item regarding the LCI as outlined by Mayor Pro Tem Markle. Any discussion? All those in favor, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. Councilman Hypes, and that makes it unanimous. Thank you, Ms. Cook. So that'll wrap up that portion of tonight's agenda. We'll move on to the workshop item. And the workshop item is the Economic Development Strategic Plan Kickoff Presentation. Mr. Morsell, you do have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you. Before you tonight is a kickoff presentation by our consultants who are doing our Economic Development Strategic Plan. This was initially set in motion in early 2020 in the early winter, but it was tabled as the COVID-19 pandemic clearly affected the global economy. We reinvigorated this effort with RKG and Associates earlier this summer. They were slated for the kickoff presentation before council in June. However, that council meeting was tabled. But he is here tonight with his associate, and they are here to do a kickoff presentation with you all. And I'd like to introduce Kyle and Matt with RKG and Associates, and they have the floor.
Before they get started, while this presentation we have up is interesting, it doesn't really speak to this item you're about to see. So we need to figure out how to get the right, I mean, as much as you might want to talk about SOX and other technology things, we've sort of blew through that just a couple of minutes ago. So let's see if we can get the right presentation before you get started.
Security is good? How's that?
There we go. All right. Off to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be back in front of you. It's unfortunate that we had a 2-year delay, but frankly, I think it was a wise decision by the council and by the community, given what has happened through the COVID-19 pandemic and what is happening as we come out of the COVID-19 pandemic. I fear that much of that plan probably wasn't going to be very valuable to the city. So we're excited to be back here. I appreciate to be back in front of council again. I was informed that brevity is the key to it, so I will try to make this one quick because this is just a kickoff to the process. Lance already covered much of this, of what we're doing and why we're back here now. We were hoping to get it completed by December 2022, and unfortunately the delays that we had over summer is probably going to push it a month or two, but we do anticipate being done with this hopefully by the end of February of next year. Really what we're hoping to accomplish through this process is help the community, and if you all are not aware, and I know there's a couple of council members that are on the working group for this, there was a working group that was created to work with us as we go through the process and staff to help guide. And really what we're trying to do is define economic development for the community and then come up with strategic recommendations of how to meet those goals as effectively and efficiently as we can. Economic development, there we go. Did I overhit the button? No, I did not. Okay. So economic development, as we define at RKG, is a series of strategic actions and investments that leverage your assets to attract private investment and to improve the financial, fiscal, and economic well-being of the community. What I really want to focus on around here is how do we leverage what the city can do to maximize the investment from the private sector. The goal here isn't for the city to take on and do everything. In reality, what is possible for the city of Alpharetta is going to be substantially costly. But the goal is to put in place the measures that we need so that the private sector wants to make the investments and wants to do the types of projects that we envision for our community. And so that's the direction that we're going to help push through this. And those benchmarks can vary greatly. And you can see here, I don't need to read these for you. You've hopefully seen them in your packets already. But working with the working group, with staff, to try and define what we want to accomplish, what are the benchmarks that we're trying to achieve, and then help define what success means in those areas, and then provide the strategies and recommendations that can put the city in place to make that happen. This is going to be a rhetorical question for all, but kind of put you in the mindset of how we're trying to go through this. And it's a little game I like to call, what would you choose? And option A is a new investment that would create $2.5 million of annual tax base, but no new jobs. And option B is create $500,000 of annual new tax base, but 25 jobs paying $50,000. And the point of this is to get you in the mindset of how do we prioritize and make the decisions, because at the end of the day, number one, decisions aren't going to be binary, and number two, a decision we make today may influence an opportunity that we may have had tomorrow. And so if we don't, through this process, define what our goals are, when you as a community look at an investment opportunity that comes from the private sector, it's going to be challenging to determine whether or not it's the investment that we want to have, or if they are asking for a public-private partnership, is this an investment that we're willing to put our resources behind? And so there's no right or wrong answers in economic development of this. It's about what we want and then prioritizing those things. And so we'll be working with you, with the working group, with staff, to define what these goals and priorities are so that when you see the recommendations, you understand how they play in with how the community sees itself. So what is the plan? It's a baseline analysis. We actually had started much of this the last go around and had to stop. And we had to start over and collect new information. It's a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. It's a market assessment. The assets that we have in play already. It's a workforce assessment. It's what is our competitiveness within the marketplace, not just here in North Fulton County and the Metro Atlanta region, but what is our competitiveness nationally and globally. It's looking at those types of industries that are most likely wanting to come here. One of the things that I talked about earlier with the working group that we had a session earlier today was around diversification, right? Is not being so committed to a single industry that is so heavily influencing our market that we then live and die by the market fluctuations for that one particular one. And then strategic recommendations, everything around how do we organize, how we do economic development, to the tools that we need to put in place, whether they be regulatory, policy, financial. How do we prioritize those goals? How do we manage the physical assets that we have? We talked earlier today with the working group, there's about 400 acres of undeveloped land within the city that is not encumbered with some sort of environmental or regulatory requirements. That's not a whole lot. And so how do we make sure we manage those assets and we look at not just the use of those lands, but the reuse of lands that maybe already have physical facilities on them? And then how do we collaborate? How do we continue to, I think it's a great segue in how do we work with the CID and our neighboring communities on projects that benefit all of us? And how do we maximize those relationships so that we can help leverage their resources on our behalf as well? So the other thing I wanted to make sure I pointed out is what the plan is, but also what the plan is not, so that we can all set expectation and understand what comes out of it. There's no such thing as an answer in economic development. There's a series of goals and then actions and recommendations that we can recommend to you based on what we can foresee into the future and best practices that are out there. Some of the recommendations you may not get to for a year or 2 years or 5 years, and I don't need to explain to you how the world can change in just 2 short years. And so it's not about what the answer is but what are we trying to accomplish and why are we trying to accomplish that? So when you do get to some of those recommendations, you have the understanding of what the purpose of that is, so that if you have to change the approach slightly or even substantially, you understand where we're trying to go with it. It's not a cheerleader. There are a substantial number of things that we can tout here in the city of Alpharetta. This is one of the more exciting communities I get to work in, because most communities hire us, don't have a lot of economic development potential, and they're trying to start something. We're trying to continue the tremendous amount of success that we have, but the reality is there are some challenges that we face, and there are some things that we may not be as competitive in. So my job through this process is to help identify those. It's not to rub it in, if you will, but it's to recognize what they are to help you come up with solutions on how to address those. It's not a one-size-fits-all. The concepts are going to be relative to your community, but we are going to be looking at different areas of the city and what the economic development potential is for those. I don't need to explain to you the difference between downtown, Windward Parkway, and Avalon, and North Point Mall to explain to you there are different areas of the city, have different strengths, different opportunities, and can meet different needs that we as a community want to have. But it's also not parcel by parcel. We're not going to be going in and saying 123 Main Street should be this and 456 Elm Street should be that. It's about identifying areas where the city can capitalize on the economic development opportunities that it has that mesh with the economic development vision that it creates. The participation through this process, the technical panel, which is the city staff that we're meeting with concurrently with the working group, and I'm also communicating with Lance on a regular basis. Obviously, the times that we come here in front of you to provide information and get feedback, engaging with the citizens through one-on-one interviews and focus groups, whether they be residents, business owners, the real estate professional community. We're engaging to try and understand those qualitative components of the market here in Alpharetta, as well as the quantitative ones that I can collect through a series of data sources. And all that goes into the project to help us identify and understand where we want to go. So I talked to you kind of about where we're doing this and what we're doing here. Getting feedback from the community, whether it be from staff, from your residents, from the businesses, from the council, is very, very important. We have a series of strategies of how we're going to go about doing that we're going to be executing in partnership with the staff. This is one I always like to show because oftentimes people confuse consensus with unanimous. And they think they're in economic development, there's some perfect Venn diagram where we can meet everybody's expectations, desires, fears, and concerns, and there's one solution that can hit all of those things. The reality is all of these different components, the community vision, market reality, our physical assets, our competitiveness, our financial capacity, and our fiscal sustainability will touch upon the strategies that we can go after. But I've yet in the 25 years I've been doing this with RKG, been able to find where there's that one answer that hits all those things. So we are going to work with you the council, with you the working group, with you the community to try and find ways to get to consensus. Unfortunately, I don't believe we're going to be able to find solutions that are going to make everyone 100% happy. If I had that magic power, I'd be living in the Cayman Islands scuba diving every day because I would have made a whole lot of money selling that secret to folks. But the reality is that we're going to have to try and work towards consensus. And hopefully at the end of this, even if you're not 100% in agreement with the recommendation, you are in agreement with what we're trying to accomplish and understand why we're saying maybe this should be first and that should be second. I will say, though, through this process, if you do have concerns, I want you to express to me them before we get to the goal line rather than as we get to the goal line, so we don't end up with some awkward meetings where we have to go back and fix stuff, and then I have to submit a change order to Lance, and then you have questions about why I'm asking for more money. The providing the roadmap, the strategies, what is our capacity, what are the fundings, and then what is the timing. It's really around how do we get you where you want to go, how do we put you in a position to be as effective and efficient as possible in achieving your goals. And so whether it's specifically what do we do, or how do we develop or build the capacity or work with the capacity that we have, is what type of funding do we need, and are we willing to make those investments, and what are the returns that we want in exchange for that type of investment. So if we're going to put money behind a project, does it have to meet a certain number of jobs, or does it have to create a certain income level? Does it have to provide fringe benefits to employees? All those things are things that we can talk about in terms of what are we willing to do and not do, and then obviously timing. We're not going to be able to do everything all at once. I've yet to work in a community where we have the full resources and staff capacity to accomplish all the goals that we established. So how do we time some of this stuff and then identify ways that we can build value add? And as we are successful maybe in some areas, then we start talking about how do we get to the next area and the next area and the next area. My ask of you all, through the plan development, we're going to have interim briefings. We're going to bring information back to you to provide input and feedback to me, good or bad. You know, you're not going to insult me if you say I don't agree with that. We can have a conversation. If there's information out there that I'm not aware of or haven't collected, be happy to go do that with you. Obviously, hopefully at the end you approve and adopt the plan as the economic development strategy for the city. And then implementation. The reality is, and you all were participatory in this tonight, once you come up with the ideas and concepts, there are going to be projects brought in front of you. There are going to be investment opportunities that are going to be presented to you, and engaging in those processes and also championing the plan. Hopefully the council through this process buys in and is behind this and becomes the champions for this, because getting support from you all is equally as important as getting support from the business community to help engage and inform and educate the community, not just on what we're trying to do, but why we're trying to do it. Alpharetta is no different than any other community where your residents are going to want to understand what's in it for me to be able to do this. And so hopefully through this process, you are in a position to be able to help answer those questions so that we can get to the solutions that we're hoping to accomplish from an economic development perspective. I do have a series of discussion questions. I think maybe given the time frame that I was asked to do, I would like to get you these questions and either when I come back the next time be able to either answer those questions directly, or if you would want to provide written responses to those questions, or if we want to do one-on-one interviews, I'd be happy to do it however you would feel the most valuable to me, but to this process. But these are things that I would love to hear your collective thoughts on. If you want to do them now, I'm not going anywhere until tomorrow night. When my flight is, I think, at 8:30 p.m. But I also respect the fact that it is getting late and it's been a long evening for all of us. And so, but I do hope to get the responses back from you all, because that will help us as we go through the process.
What would be the sense of council? Would you?
Email.
Later seems to be the consensus.
Yes, yes, I'm okay with that. I'm happy to accommodate, you know, and once again, I know Councilman Merkel and Councilman Will are on the working group with me, so they're hearing, they're going to.
That's why he wants to leave.
Yes.
Because he's heard you already, but I would like to just.
Councilman Dorito.
Kyle, thanks very much. I'm sure you heard the great news that the coach of Georgia Tech was relieved of his duties today.
Let me just say this.
And you're a Jersey boy, by the
I sent
way.
a communication to the athletic department Saturday afternoon, immediately after the UCF game, and I was quite shocked that they responded to me so quickly.
Yeah. I'm also from Jersey, just so you know.
Very good.
We'll get along really well. My son went to Georgia Tech. Yes. Anyway, and I'll be real quick, because I know people want to get out. It is getting late. Just listening to you, and rightfully so, you're giving us this 40,000-foot overview of what you're venturing down this path on developing economic development strategy for the city. And Lance, thank you so much for leading this. I really appreciate it, because this is critically important as far as I'm concerned. When I look at the economic development of any city in the state of Georgia, and you may know this already, but there's some complexities to it from a standpoint, or I should say not complexities, barriers. Today, if we want to attract a corporation into Alpharetta, a lot of times there's not much the city could do to attract that corporation, because it's basically driven by Fulton County or even state incentives. And so there's a lot of confidentiality around it, rightfully so. And so I've always been frustrated that Alpharetta cannot put together a plan where we can be competitive against other communities within the state to attract more business to the state here. And we have some great things to be attracted to, right? We have a great economic environment today, despite the pandemic, as I think the mayor talked about in past, State of the City addresses and stuff, where, we made through the pandemic extremely well, economically sound. We are an extremely competitive community in the state of Georgia, and frankly, around the entire nation, for a very good reason. And so we do have a foothold. So what needs to happen is we need to continue to sustain Alpharetta being, in effect, creating our own environment to attract investment, to attract people that want to live here. And I'm not sure we can build enough housing today for the people that want to move into Alpharetta. It just seems like it never stops. And that's a good thing. But I'm looking at down the line, 10, 20 years from now, how do we sustain that, right? Because the communities around us are going to get smarter, they're going to be developing their communities out, and they're going to be even more fierce competition to the city. And so technology obviously drives that. We're known as the technology city of the South for good reason. And that's a big reason why many of our companies come here and people want to live here. Our educational system's sound and extremely well. We have great public safety. Those are three, I think, pillars that make for a sound economic development strategy in itself before we do other things to enhance that. I know you're going to address these, and I hope you are, but the housing side of it, and I'll use the term lightly, the affordability of housing in Alpharetta. How do we provide some sense of, whether it be through the type of jobs we create here, whatever, that we are able to provide sufficient, I hate to use the word affordable housing because it's defined differently by different people. But let's just say housing that a professional can actually live here, live, work, and play here. So that's something we just got to address, right? Because we haven't really addressed it as a city yet. And we haven't had to because we have people, like I said, coming into our city want to live here. And so we don't need to attract housing. The housing is being filled up as we build it. So it's the county and state barriers that I think I would love for you to address and see how we can, in effect, get around that. It might be legislative action at the state level to help us with that down the line. Continuing to be the technology city of the South, and whatever that means for future technologies, that we have to continue to build upon that. And then the housing elements, and certainly continue, support a significant public safety model, and support our school system and all the things that are going right today for Alpharetta. It's really just continuing that and making sure that we don't lose sight of the important things we need to do as a government.
I appreciate that feedback. And hopefully that serves as a template for all of you as you think through the responses to these questions, as you get them, whatever is on your mind in terms of what you think the priorities are, where we should be driving the bus. That's the kind of feedback that benefits us to ensure that we can then have communications around all those different things, and we can have a conversation around how do we better engage the state and the county. What are the realities of business recruitment and attraction based on the size and scale of the company, and what can the role of a city be or a municipality be within that infrastructure? Just to choose one as an example. Happy to engage and have that conversation and talk about things that we can do to better leverage those relationships and be proactive in it rather than reactive to things that come from top down.
I believe Councilman Mitchell may have a statement or a question.
Two quick things, and I'm not sure if you realize you have a cousin here named Steve Beecham. No. Does anybody else see some similarities? Yeah. One thing he's a local character here. So, new opportunities that arise, that as we develop this economic development plan, how do we incorporate a plan that's flexible enough and open enough to accept new opportunities that perhaps we had not envisioned for our city, and then to say, does this fit or does it not, and is it something we should go with or based on our economic development plan, or can we have one that's flexible enough to adjust? And
So the answer to that is absolutely, and so that's the reason why I want to talk about what are the priorities, what are the things that are most important to us? Is it job creation? Is it tax base? Is it fiscal sustainability? Is it quality of life? Is it the type of job? Is it a type of industry? What are the things that are our highest priorities? Because what we can help to do is create a framework that says, all right, and we're going to be looking at it, like I mentioned, as different parts of the city. And someone can say, hey, look, I want to do this type of project downtown. And you're going to say, well, we kind of worked through that through our economic development strategy, and that's really not where we want that scale of development. or that's where we really don't want that kind of development, or that type of investment. We do want that over here. We think that it's appropriate in this location, but we kind of talked this through the economic development strategic planning process, said that's not the location for that. And that's just for instance. I mean, there's a number of things, but working with the community and working with you all in the working group and the feedback that we get will help us when we create recommendations, to not just provide what should we do, but explain why we're recommending to do it. So that as new opportunities maybe that aren't envisioned through this, or there's a new technology that's invented 3 years from now that no one could ever have dreamed of, you can say, does that fit in with what we're talking about here? And if so, where and how? And then use this kind of as a guideline document to be able to address those things. So yes, the whole conversation around prioritizing what is the most important thing to us as a community is going to help then set that framework of, as new opportunities come around, to say the plan hopefully will provide you with that understanding that says, look, when we talked about this, we said this was important, that was important, that was important, and this checks 5 of those 6 boxes, so it's okay. Or maybe it only checks 1 of those 6 boxes, so maybe this is an opportunity that we pass on.
All right. And the other was, real quick, you touched on it. We have 400 available undeveloped acres thus far. But how do we repurpose underutilized properties and yet still appeal to major players and compete against, like, the northern or counties further north that have unlimited acres for development, but perhaps do not have good economic plans in place?
Well, I think a lot of that's going to be a combination of the financial reality, because many of the properties that are developed, it's not like they're not productive. Mm-hmm. And so to incent someone to go from an asset that is already producing return, you're going to have to provide something that provides them better return. But also, once again, it's around defining what do we want and looking at some of those sites and saying, hey, so the easy one to pick on, right, because you guys have been talking about it for quite a while now, is North Point Mall, right? What is the future of that? What does it look like? How does it fit within the goals that we're that we've created from an economic development perspective? Is it going to be this destination, town center that complements what has gone on in Avalon? Is it going to be a completely different kind of animal where we're going to try and build, a biotech park? Though we will kind of talk through all the feasibilities, both market, financial, and economic, around those different ideas, and so that hopefully the city then can coalesce around some ideas saying, hey, we really think this area, this location, this part of the community is really great for that, and then engage with the property owners post this strategy to try and make that happen. And so to say, look, this is what we envision for our community. Now let's go figure out let's work with the folks that are in control of these assets, because the vast majority of them we don't as a city. We control land use, but we don't control the actual property, and see if we can come up with a strategy that can meet everybody's needs and everybody's expectations of return, whether they be economic or financial.
Any other questions? Thanks, sir.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to working with you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I will say that having been part of the process and selecting the team and all that before, and having to stop because of COVID, at the time it was, crucial. And we were really stunned that we couldn't proceed because we knew we were at a pivotal point. But in hindsight, I'm glad we're having this conversation now. Had we gone through a 6-9 month process for a strategic economic development plan and then COVID hit, we'd just be starting all over from scratch anyway. So I'm glad we're stepping into this now. Now is the time, and I'm very optimistic that it'll be successful. Thank you. So that'll wrap up the workshop for this evening. We have a public comment portion of tonight's meeting. If anyone would like to come forward. Ms. Shapiro, do we have any public comment cards?
We do not, sir.
However, if anyone would like to come forward, now's your opportunity. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Reports? Does anyone have a report? I do have just a couple. First of all, I want to say that I had the opportunity to attend the retirement of a 2-star Marine general here in Brook Street Park on Saturday. and I was blown away. General Alford had been the commanding general at Quantico, and I can't even begin to relay his whole career. He's an impressive man, and he and his wife have chosen to live in Alpharetta. And anyone familiar with the military knows that a retirement ceremony for a two-star general is a big deal. And it's usually done on a parade field with lots of troops sweating in the sun, marching and things like that. And he chose to do it at Brook Street Park because they live here now. And he saw the statue in Brook Street Park. And he said, this is where I want to have it. And it was quite impressive. And thanks to Janet Rogers for helping to coordinate those efforts. There were 500 people here. There were 14 generals in attendance. That doesn't happen. If you're outside the Pentagon, you don't have 14 generals. And it was just a really impressive event. And he's an impressive man. I hope we'll get to know him more in the future, I'm sure. So I wanted to mention that. Blue Moon Fest was outstanding. I know many of you attended, and it was just perfect weather. The band was great, and it didn't look like there were any hiccups or anything. So that was tremendous. That's the good stuff. I just want to update everyone about Lost. So we did have mediation on Friday. I wouldn't say that it was successful in any stretch of the imagination. However, at least the county did participate in mediation. They would not participate in public. So their mediation team cloistered in a room and didn't come face to face with us or the media, as happened newspapers were there to cover it. Our own reporter, Alex Pop. And there really wasn't any movement by them that was considered reasonable. So we're still kind of at a logjam at this point. We will go through the second portion of mediation on October 7th. Hopefully there'll be better results then. For those of you that weren't able to attend, we did have a town hall in Roswell last week. Tremendous event. We had all the cities in North Fulton represented. We had 2 mayors from South Fulton, Mayor Motley Broom from College Park, Mayor Holiday Ingram from the city of East Point, who participated as well. I would gather to say there was probably at least 100 people in the chambers at Roswell, and there was overwhelming support for the city's effort to retain the revenues that we currently have. And there will be another event this Wednesday. And so I'm going down to College Park Convention Center. If any of you would like to join me, I know Roswell has offered to have buses to drive down there. People can carpool and things like that. So I expect the more the public learns about what is being done by Fulton County and trying to take revenues that are currently going to support city services without really justifying how those monies will be used by the county. I think the public is starting to understand that it's a con game. But, Councilman Biden?
I think it's definitely great that y'all are bringing the public pressure on that. My question is when, from what I remember on our GMA handout of the mediation that you're going through, when does that end, the period that they say, okay, we can't get to one? I think that's like in October, beginning of October or so?
Well, we're having a second mediation on the 7th, and then it will either be successful or then we can pursue arbitration, which is what the cities intend to do. However, neither of them are binding. Yeah. I mean, in the end, it's going to come down to the county signing a document with cities that represent at least 51% of the population.
I guess it's my next point is, when do we start consider talking to our state legislators who are currently campaigning on local control to say that this process is broken and that it's irreconcilable differences? And
those discussions have been ongoing for weeks, if not months.
You're absolutely right. This track that the county's taking us on is going to
be a huge tax increase to a lot of our municipalities.
This is a bipartisan issue in Fulton County, and I will say that two of our representatives were at that town hall, Senator John Albers, who publicly stated that it needed to get fixed, there needed to be an agreement worked out, or the legislature would have to step in. Representative Robichaud from Roswell also came and spoke to me afterwards and indicated that she was having conversations with the Fulton delegation. So they're well aware that the impact of taking $3 billion worth of sales revenue off the table for everybody in Fulton County is just not an option. And so it's incumbent upon the county and the cities to reach an agreement that serves all of our residents. And we're trying to do that, but I guarantee you, everybody at the state capitol understands that $3 billion worth of sales tax revenue in the economic driver of our state is not something that can be toyed with.
Yep. Well, I think the issue itself is very impressive that all the mayors are working together and holding strong. So that's got to say something. I hope we unify our representatives. I haven't heard from all of them, like our Alpharetta, Chuck Martin, and Senator Brandon Beach too, but just to make sure that they know that it's detrimental, that we may need them on Jan 1, once session opens or whenever it does, that this is taken up quickly.
And your point is well taken. And I assure you, it's not overlooked, but we'll continue those conversations.
Good job.
Thank you, sir. So those are my reports. If anyone has any questions about the lost negotiations or anything, feel free to reach out to me one-on-one. And last time I heard, we do not have an executive session item, so I will not call for a motion to adjourn or to recess into one. That being said,
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion by Councilman Mitchell, second by Councilman Will. All those in favor of adjourning this meeting, please vote yes. Oh, we forgot to take Dan Merkel off the dais. Councilman Merkel had to leave. There we go. And it was unanimous. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your attendance. See you next time.
Council, if I could get your signature on the ordinance on your way out, that would be great.
Y'all can't be trusted on it.